as the government shutdown is poised to become the longest in U.S. history, stretching into its fifth week. Federal employees have missed paychecks. Critical food assistance is in jeopardy, and lines are growing longer outside of food banks. The country is just 2 days away from Election Day, with pivotal contests for governor in New Jersey and Virginia, where former President Obama was campaigning this weekend. Plus, the race for New York City mayor, which could shape the future of the Democratic Party. And in California, Prop 50 is on the ballot. Governor Gavin Newsom's attempt to add safe Democratic seats to the congressional map in his state in response to red states doing the same at the behest of President Trump. My interview with Governor Newsom is coming up next. But first, we start with Steve Kornacki and a brand new NBC News poll with some big results. Steve, break this down for us.
Yeah, Kristen, as you say, 48 hours from now, the first votes of major elections since last year's presidential, we're going to get them. And this NBC News poll here is our first poll since the spring. And what we find is a mood that has soured on Trump and the Republican Party in that time. An approval rating of 43% now in our new poll for Donald Trump. But check out our previous poll. This was back in March. 47-51. He was starting out now well into his first year of the second term, down to a 43% job approval rating for President Trump. This, of course, coming against the backdrop of the government shutdown. We asked the question, who do you blame? 42% say Democrats in Congress, but 52% said it's either the president's fault or his party in Congress's fault.
This is striking, Steve, because here we are a month into this shutdown now, and more Americans still pointing the finger at Republicans for this.
Certainly seems like it could be related to some of the numbers we're seeing here. Yeah. Now, check this out. Talk about Trump and his job performance on particular issues. Again, basically a year ago, he was elected. We asked folks, do you think he's delivering here? He does get decent marks when it comes to border security and immigration. Slight majority say he has lived up to what he promised to do there, but on none of these other topics do you see that number getting past the mid-40s. In fact, the low 30s down here on the economy questions.
Well, and part of why President Trump was elected on the economy, now it seems like it could be a headwind heading into Tuesday for Republicans.
And a huge shift, obviously, from his first term, too, when he actually did get good marks there. So you talk about heading into this Tuesday. We asked folks about their enthusiasm for the midterm elections. That'll be next year, 2026. But this was astounding. 66%, two-thirds of all voters have a high level of interest. We will find that number typically on the eve of the actual midterm election. This is a year out. And this is what's encouraging for Democrats, troubling for Republicans. More enthusiasm for Democrats. That high level of interest, it's about 3/4 of Democrats. It is a little bit lower there for Republicans, and that could feed into the second part of this equation, and that is we asked folks, midterm election, which party would you want to control Congress? And the Democrats have now, in our poll, this is significant, opened up an 8-point advantage over Republicans. We checked this back in the spring. It was dead even. That 8-point level is typically what you would find for a party that's poised for a big midterm election. That's the kind of lead Democrats had when they swept to power in Congress in Trump's first term. So we'll see if that holds now going forward, but that's a potentially big shift. Are there notes of caution here for Democrats? Yes, there are. This is the big one right here. The party's image. Democrats only 28% positive. Look at that, 53 negative. Republicans, it's only 37 and 46. Democrats are 25 points underwater. And we should also note, this is coming, as we say, during the shutdown, and our pollsters do note that sometimes during shutdowns, there can be a little volatility in these numbers. So I think it really heightens the stakes for Tuesday night in these elections, and especially in New Jersey, because Republicans think they can win that one. And if Republicans can win in New Jersey, despite the numbers we're showing here, they're going to be feeling a little bit more encouraged heading into next year. But if the Democrats have a big night, these numbers, a lot to say about it.
Yeah, Steve, all eyes are going to be on New Jersey, that closer than expected race. Steve Kornacki, fascinating findings. Thank you so much. Well, this week I sat down with California Governor Gavin Newsom for a wide-ranging conversation, and I started by asking him about the state of the Democratic Party. Do you believe the Democratic brand is damaged right now?
Not right now. 4 months ago, if you asked me that question, I would have been struggling to find positive signs of the party. I feel it's a completely different moment. I feel like we're on the precipice of a remarkable moment on November 4th. And not only where I'm confident we're going to win here with Proposition 50, but you're going to have 2 new remarkable governors in Virginia in New Jersey. You're going to have a dynamic young mayor, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, that ran an extraordinary and exceptional campaign that galvanized people that frankly have been disenfranchised from politics. And we've got leaders now that have a united front and a message that's breaking through on healthcare with Schumer's and Jeffries that give me real confidence that the Democratic Party is on its ascendancy, and November 4th will be a pivotal moment marking a new frame, new energy for our party.
We're going to talk about each of those issues that you just mentioned, but it sounds like you're predicting a big night for Democrats on November 4th.
I am, and for obvious reasons. I mean, this is a historically unpopular president. His policies are even more unpopular than the president himself. In every core category, he's underwater, and he's a guy who promised to make us wealthier and healthier. We're poorer and sicker. Across the board, people are starting to realize that not only is our coffee more expensive, their beef is more expensive, but the cost of an automobile is more expensive. Since he became president, the cost of utilities, all the things he promised to solve day one, he hasn't solved. So his recklessness aside, his style aside, the substance he hasn't delivered. And that's why, again, we're here at Prop 50, because he knows he's going to lose the midterms, and he's trying to rig the election before one vote is cast.
Let's talk about the battle that you are waging here in California over Prop 50. For people who are watching, this would enable a redistricting effort here in the state to add additional Democratic seats. It comes after Republicans in Texas moved to redistrict to add up to 5 additional Republican seats there at the direction of President Trump. Do you think that Prop 50 is going to pass on Tuesday, Governor?
I'm deeply confident, as long as we do everything that we've set out to do over the next few days. We don't believe in running the 90-yard dash. We run at peak the 110-yard dash. But the people have spoken. I mean, spoken so far in historic ways. It's a special election. We've seen unprecedented number of ballots already sent in. We have an all-mail-in ballot system here, and of course we have a big turnout we expect on Election Day. But we're seeing overwhelming understanding and recognition of what's at stake. And remember, it's Prop 50, because this impacts everyone watching in all 50 states. As I said a moment ago, Donald Trump is an historic president, historically unpopular. He's been very open and honest, including right outside the White House just last week, saying incumbents are likely to lose the midterms. That's why he called Greg Abbott. That's why he said he's, quote unquote, entitled. Think about that. Entitled to 5 seats. That's why he sent J.D. Vance to Indiana shortly thereafter. That's why he moved in Missouri. He moved the folks in North Carolina. And now we've got a special election in Indiana, or rather a special session, and likely movement in Florida. He is not screwing around. He's changing the rules. He's rigging the game because he knows he'll lose if all things are equal. He did not expect California to fight fire with fire.
Your predecessor, former Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, disagrees with this effort. He's been one of your most vocal critics.
I think that Prop 50 is a big scam. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it says that we should fight Trump, and because he's a threat to democracy. But in the meantime, they want to go and tear up the Constitution in California, get rid of the independent commission that draws the district lines, and take the power away from the people and give it back to the politicians.
What do you say to Governor Schwarzenegger, who says the fight for Prop 50 is just a big scam?
Well, former Republican Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's in all the Republican ads, is wrong on a number of points that he just made. First of all, we're not throwing out the independent redistricting. We're affirming national independent redistricting. We're maintaining our current independent redistricting for statewide races, but in response to what happened in Texas, temporarily changing the maps for 3 cycles for the congressional races. It reverts then back to its original form, number 1. Number 2, the people are deciding. The maps are in the ballot. They're there in front of the voters in a way that have never been done in California or American history. So it's temporary, it's transparent, we maintain the commission, and we're responding to the crisis, not of our making, but the crisis that Donald Trump advanced, Greg Abbott, and other Republicans that don't believe in fair and free elections. They don't. Why else would they be moving in this unprecedented way?
One of the biggest battles you're having with him is your fight over the deployment of U.S. troops. to cities across this country,
Yeah.
including here in California. Do you trust the Justice Department to handle these cases?
Absolutely not.
You don't trust the Justice
Are
Department?
you kidding? It's a
Do
personal
you trust
attorney.
the legal system?
I have
to handle
confidence
these
in the
cases
lower
over
courts,
truth?
and I'm holding hope that there's one co-equal branch of government left, and that's the judiciary. But again, not on the basis of the shadow docket in the U.S. Supreme Court, but the courts, the lower courts, the federal courts have held pretty strong, and so I'm hopeful it's the last institution standing. Again, he's assaulting all institutions that stand in his way. And obviously, I mentioned the 1/3 of the decisions that he appears to have dismissed. The courts are one of the most powerful and potent, so I'm hopeful, but I'm not naive. Posse comitatus, it's not complicated. You cannot use the United States military for domestic law enforcement. He just announced he will be sending out strike teams, and he'll be organizing in every state these strike teams. Wake up. What the hell do we need to tell people that to get them off their couch to say, well, hold on, I may have liked his bluster, I may not have liked the last guy, but I didn't sign up for this.
You have been one of the most outspoken Democratic voices against President Trump, and part of your tactic is to imitate some of what we see online from President Trump. So you mimic his all-cap posts, you send out similar memes. Do you run the risk of normalizing that behavior?
Quite the contrary. The whole expression was to not allow it to be normalized. It was becoming normalized. All this, the normalization of deviancy across the spectrum of issues, but his communication, he's dressing up as the Pope, as Superman. Hold on, he's putting his face on Mount Rushmore. He's saying, thank you. It's madness. And so I put a mirror up to that madness.
It reminds me of something Michelle Obama said once. When they go low, we go high. Is there still room for that mindset?
I would love to go back to that, but politics have changed. The world's changed. The rules of the game have changed. Now we have to rewrite the new rules. I'm trying to iterate. I'm in that process of doing that. But Michelle Obama also recently was interviewed about that comment, and she amended that comment about going high is also going strategic, meaning finding strategies to address concerns and anxieties. So she's evolved on her own foundational principle, but it's the right one. We're all better off. We're all better off. This can't continue forever. All of us living in a state of fear and anxiety, on edge. And so, of course, we want to go back to some semblance of normalcy. But you have to deal with the crisis at hand. It's just been 10, 11 months of this presidency. We have 3 more years. Time to batten down the hatches. And it's time for us to change if we want things to change. And that's why our communication strategy has shifted.
I want to talk to you about the polarization, that very issue in this country, because you have reached across the aisle. In fact, in your first episode of your podcast, you invited conservative activist Charlie Kirk to join you for a conversation. He was, of course, assassinated in September. Why did you want to speak to Charlie Kirk?
Because success leaves clues. He was organizing on the campuses. He was successful at getting out the vote. He has a voice, a huge voice, an outsized voice in the MAGA movement. And I talked to Democratic friends and allies, and they weren't familiar with him. And I asked about, well, what exists in the Democratic Party? What are we doing about it? He was, to his credit, kind enough to fly out and sit down with me. We talked about our wife. We talked about our kids. We talked about the future of this country in vehemently different points of view. I mean, it's like daylight and darkness in terms of the contrasting component. We stayed in touch a little bit. And I just think that's healthy. And I know some folks on my party were offended by it. You platformed by it. I had 0 downloads on my podcast. So who platformed who? But I did the same with Bannon. I did the same thing with Newt Gingrich, who helped lead my recall campaign. I've done that with Sean Spicer, people on the other side, because at the end of the day, divorce is not an option.
What role do leaders like yourself have in turning down the temperature?
We got to call that out. It sickens you to your core. I mean, you talk about weakness. I mean, the violence solves for nothing. And so it just needs to be called out, period, full stop, not exploited by anybody. Forget politics here. How can anybody condone violent acts? And those I remember getting a call from my son after Charlie was shot, and he asked me as if I would know, did he die? And full disclosure, I sent a text to him, wishing for his recovery. Little did I know. I'm rather humiliated. I haven't shared that. As a human being, my son is not a fan of his, but knew of him. And it impacted him, and he was on a speakerphone. He's a young kid at school. It impacted a lot of folks. And I think about my son at that moment. I think that's something he'll never forget. His generation won't forget. So this is God bless. I said, I prayed for him. And little did I know, he probably had already passed away. And so grace, when President Trump was shot, unconscionable, unacceptable, called it out with clarity and conviction. I didn't like on the other side with respect, and this is not other sideism, but there was not that same kind of humanity that was expressed when Paul Pelosi was attacked. There was a lot of, sort of mockery around that. And there's certainly mockery from the left about Charlie Kirk, which was wrong. So all of that needs to be called out. Or again, we're all in this together. And so I think, again, we can go back and forth. That's why I say open hand, not a closed fist. The President of the United States calls him and answers the call. And respect the office, even if I disagree fundamentally with the individual in that office.
And when we come back, more from my interview with Governor Newsom, his defense of President Biden, and his own political ambitions for 2028.